Welcome to Rising Edge TV. My name is Philippe Gouraud. I'm the CEO of Rising Edge, and I'm really excited to actually host today a fantastic panel to talk about the 5 steps of the life of a D&O policy. So today we will have Lian Grass. Lian, you are a Managing Director for International Financial Lines at Howden. Robert, welcome to you as well. Robert Barnes, you're an account executive at Gauss of London, a wholesale broker in the London market, specializing in financial lines. And also a very warm welcome to you, Ellie, our very own Ellie Fisher, Senior Underwriting at Rising Edge. Welcome, Ellie.
Thank you.
So, 5 steps of in the life of a D&O insurance policy. So we'll go through each of these steps, and the first of these steps is risk mapping. So, Lian, could you please tell us a little bit more? What exactly does it mean, risk mapping, and who does it?
Sure, of course. This for me is the beginning of the policy, obviously, and this is all about client engagement for me. And the risk mapping, I think, starts with us as brokers. Before you go and meet that client for the new business or the renewal meeting, you've got to do some homework on the territory, the industry, and the particular company. They're not going to expect you to walk in there and know how to run their company and everything that's going on. But a slight bit of homework, slight bit of education on what is actually happening in their world really can help to lead those conversations. And the important points I'm always looking for in those meetings is, what can I see that's going to make an underwriter nervous? What can I see to advise them that we need a little bit more colour and clarification around? What questions can I ask them? So that for me is the risk mapping, and walking in there and actually giving them some advice on, what do I see, as in what's happening to other clients in that industry, in that territory, to take that advice into them and actually have those conversations, I think is excellent. It also begins the process of listening. And I think that's the biggest skill that I've had to learn as a broker is we're all too quick to walk into those client conversations armed with all we know from Google, Bloomberg, Advisen, and start telling them what their risk is, start telling them what they should buy and what we think they should do. But actually, to have that information, just ask questions, listen to their feedback, give them advice on the feedback, I think is the most important thing. Setting the task of, what's important to that client? What are they concerned about? What's the board talking about? We're not there. We can only read public information if public information is even available. So just to sit and listen and set the process and understand where the client stands on a lot of that stuff, as a broker, I think that's really powerful. And then it can lead into the conversations of advice. And that's what we're there as brokers to do. We're not there to post box. We're not there to be robots. We've got to provide value. And that for me is advice around their key points that they've told you, key points that you've noticed that they may not even realize they have some kind of red flags or nervous touch points in the market.
And from a D&O perspective, is there any area that is particularly in focus when you do these risk mapping? Are there areas of the company that actually are more relevant for the placement of a D&O insurance policy versus, say, if it was property insurance?
Yes, of course. I mean, you have to walk into those meetings and provide advice thinking like an insurer. What's going to make the insurers nervous? And one of the big things you look at in a publicly listed company is obviously their stock performance. Event-driven litigation, driven by then stock performance drop-offs. Let's have a look at that together. That's one of the big points to start at. How has their share performed over the year? How are investors feeling? What are investors saying? That's a really pertinent point. And then for any company, I think at the moment, what we're seeing a lot of concern around is insolvencies. So actually really looking at their financials, understanding their cash position, understanding what they're doing with that cash, do they need to raise, etc. I think insolvency is a huge part of what's happening. And apart from that, I think the most other common issue we're seeing is regulatory. So how are they behaving? What is happening in their world? Are they under the scrutiny in terms of an industry, in terms of any regulators? So it's those things I'm kind of looking at and talking to them about, because that for me is what an insurer is going to want to hear from me or the client, is those pertinent issues.
Robert, maybe before we start talking about the risk mapping with you, for our audience, can you explain a little bit like what is your positioning in the chain as a wholesale broker?
Certainly. We act as an intermediary between the retail insurance broking partner, for example, in the United States, and the Lloyd's and London market here. So we would work with that retail insurance broking partner to Leanne's point, help prepare the submission, to help map the risk. We'd look at the risk factors that individual client has identified. We'd compare those with what we see in the wider sector. We would also inform on market conditions, claims activity. So in many ways, we are the eyes and ears of the retail broking partner in London for that on-the-ground insurance broker. They would then discuss with the client. At times, we would be involved, not always, in the discussions, in the risk mapping discussions that Leanne has alluded to.
So one question I have actually for both of you is, so risk mapping is now an activity that is almost codified, right? There are methods in terms of like how to kind of engage with the client, and it's actually a good step of corporate governance, and it tends to, for the board, leads to the risk register, right? So how often actually do you have access to the risk register as presented to the board in order to kind of like inform your pre-submission and that advisory step that you're talking about? I mean, do you get access to that document frequently?
No, not frequently. And of course, the London market's dealing with a lot of very large companies who are publicly listed. So actually, a lot of those risk factors are public information of trails and trails and trails of 20F. So a lot of it's there, of course. If not, yes, with other private companies or, not-for-profits, it's not something we get, given often. And actually, in terms of submission, we're not often asked for it.
Interesting.
No, I totally agree with Leanne there. I think that we have to make an important demarcation between the public and private risks that we might see. Private, those are much more involved in terms of extracting the information that the underwriters rightly require in order to adequately underwrite the risk. But I've actually never seen the official board risk register.
Interesting. Maybe something that the market should be thinking about.